It's the new Rouge Radio. Tony Allen.
Because I'm not a coward to stand up for my country and the league I love.
Dave Dawson.
But Jacques Chapdelain's offense is going to be focused on the pass attack with maybe 3 or 4 handoffs to Harris and Logan.
Rob Dalton.
This is Ottawa's first draft since coming back into the league. I'm looking at draft-eligible players, and this far I don't see any dead people, so they should be off to a better start.
Now, the Rouge.
Oh, baby. Brand new intro. Brand new show. Does that not feel good? The Rouge. The new Rouge Radio. No more Swagger and Stagger. I guess, Dalton, it's safe to say we didn't lose the Swagger. We just dropped it.
Yeah, we definitely dropped the Stagger. I can tell you that much.
Tony, new life. Can't believe big day today.
Oh, it seems like we've been waiting for this forever, and now that it's here, it's pretty exciting, and I'm looking forward to starting this new chapter. It's pretty cool to be asked to do what we've done. It makes you feel like you're doing something right.
The product of Rouge Radio has been around forever. Fantastic product, kind of merging our world of the Swagger and Stagger show and Rouge Radio. The new Rouge. And to go along with the deal, today's the big launch day. New website, YouTube, Facebook page, all these interactions. We're bringing on the founder of Rouge Radio, Mr. Jason Sperling, and very, very excited to chat about this brand new deal. Jason, how are you tonight, my friend? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. How about yourself, gentlemen?
Doing fantastic. We're all doing good. Speaking on behalf of the other guys, I guess, as I cut them off. Sometimes that happens on a podcast, right? Those kind of things do happen.
Sometimes.
You just got to learn to roll with it. That's the fun about it.
No stranger to podcast yourself. Jason, I guess just give us a rundown on the background of Rouge Radio and just the enterprise that it is and has become in Canada when it comes to podcasts.
Sure. I know. To keep a long story short, we started in 1995. It was called Third and Goal. After I was in high school and just loving Canadian football, had a website, and we got about 50 people that were writing, and we all agreed, why not start an actual magazine? So we started a magazine in full color print, coast to coast. We're about 10,000 copies of chapters, and we lasted about 8 issues, and that was great. We didn't have the advertising and stuff that we wanted at the time, so we packed it up early and started a website. And the Rouge Radio started. That was about 2002. So we went for about 6 years, off and on, CFL, CIS, and CJFL. That was never heard of back then. So it's been going on, off and on the podcast, like I said, for 6 years. And the last year, what happens with life gets in the way, and heard of you guys' podcast, and I thought, you know what, let's try and merge two Canadian loves together.
And we're definitely more than excited to be taking this deal apart. I guess we're kind of taken back at first, but excited. I mean, when you look at the history of Rouge Radio, how important was it for you to continue on that legacy, knowing that there weren't that many people out there who talk CFL, and obviously continuing on with CIS and CJFL. Like, how important is that to you?
I guess it's important as the word Rouge in CFL. No matter how many years people beat it down and say we don't need the Rouge, we don't need the goalpost in the end zone, it still has a fighting way of coming back. Just like Canada.
Guys,
so is it a bittersweet day here for you, Jason, to be passing the torch on this? Because it is an honor that you kind of sought us out. Is it a bittersweet day for you?
It's an exciting day because it was actually bittersweet last year when I had to kind of put it away. We couldn't find any hosts that were available. I didn't have the time. I moved to Vancouver for a new job and a new life, and this is actually exciting to get the word of the Rouge and Canadian football back to where it should be. There's other podcasts on there for other teams, but the Swag and Stagger show, you guys' show has been great, and this can just build off that.
Now,
where do you see? Oh, sorry, Dalt.
No, I could sense the hamster rolling around. You continue. I'll go after.
I was just going to say, considering where you said you started, Jason, to where podcasts now, it seems we'll see how it does develop. But, this last season or two, there's really ramped up, it seems, this desire for CFL podcasts. And by the sounds of it, all 9 teams are going to have podcasts next year. We're making this merger. Did you ever imagine podcasts would hit this kind of popularity for the Canadian Football League?
That's kind of an interesting question. I guess as a league, no, I didn't think that. I thought it would stay as fans as where it is, because it wasn't a very big money-making venture back then. But I think it could be now with advertising, like you said, social media. So I think there'd be a big boost for it. And I'm a little surprised it's taken this long, especially with the fan base that the CFL has. But it's good to be there.
Well, I got nothing to ask because Tony just took literally verbatim the question I was about to ask. So I'll let Dave continue.
I wouldn't say verbatim because Daltz generally has a way with words and sorting things out better than Tony and I can. But, I don't know if you guys have any other questions, but I think that's a pretty applicable way to wrap it up. And then, Jason, is there any comments you want to leave for the Rouge Radio listeners, I guess the faithful that have been following for quite some time? And anything you want to say to the listeners?
Well, that is kind of humbling because we've had thousands of people write in, email, phone call in, text in how much they've loved it and how much I've had probably about 50 people just today just message me saying, "Is Rouge going to be back on?" And that was kind of humbling. And it's good, like a podcast with fans. You can just say what you want. You have no association with the teams. You have no association with the leagues. I know sometimes they might cringe, but having a podcast, you can get out there and say what you want, and it actually improves the league. At the end of the day, people getting out there and talking about the good and the bad gets it out there.
So you can be able to sit back and enjoy as nothing but a pure fan now? You get to pick a team and finally wear colors?
Oh, I'm always been a green and gold fan deep down below, but like I said, I moved to BC to beautiful, Vancouver last year. I'm in Victoria now, and I've taken on the role as a community and media relations for the junior team. So I'm in it every week, and I'm living the dream out here. So
guaranteed, we will be talking with you again very, very shortly because we're excited to cover some CJFL this year as well as the CIS and green and gold. Hey, we may even have Nate Kuhorn on again sometime in the near future. So that I can probably guarantee. So speaking of junior football, we do have another guest coming up soon. But anyway, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just saying, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have another guest coming up right away to talk about the big international bowl that the U19 or the U18 International Bowl last weekend. But Jason, it's an honor. Thank you very much. Your name is in good hands, and we look forward to working with you again in the future.
Thanks. Long live the Rouge.
Long live the Rouge. Good stuff. Thank you very much to Jason Sperling. Very excited about the new deal. As we did mention, we'll be talking a lot about junior football, the CIS ranks, and the CFL. Have a guest, a CIS draft-eligible player into the CFL coming up next week, guys, in the CIS. Excited to be reaching out more to some of those younger players, and a guy who knows a thing or two about draft-eligible players heading up to the CFL. Mr. Kent Ridley from Ridley Scouting joins us on the show tonight. Kent, thanks for coming on.
Oh, you bet. Anytime for you guys.
So, I guess first things first, big game last weekend, the International Bowl. Some people who may not have heard, Canada kind of got a good thing going on. 2 years in a row beating the U.S. For those who didn't hear the news, if you can just kind of run us through the game, run us down, how it happened, and how awesome that is that Canada can play football.
Yeah, Canada had a really strong weekend there. They managed to win 3 out of the 4 games played last weekend, and looking strong heading into this weekend as well.
So they beat USA 25-9, and some people on the outside looking in might say, what the heck? How did Canada beat the U.S. in football on any level? So what do you have to say to that, and what is it about that bowl that Canada has been able to win 2 years in a row?
I think the biggest thing is being part of a road team in that situation. They've got this momentum of everybody being away from home. They really bond well together as a team. a lot of players all posted comments about how, it was lifelong memories and such a strong team environment. I think the coaches really instill that really well with the guys, and they bond together, and they're just fighting for each other.
So then what happens? Obviously Canada, because this is Canada's second win in a row, but it's definitely not their first win at this tournament. We're actually extremely successful. So what kind of happens between now and then maybe the CIS to the Canadian Football League, where suddenly people start thinking Canadians aren't good enough to play this game when we clearly are?
Yeah, and on top of that, the format of the International Bowl has changed a little bit over the years. So the teams that the Canadians are beating right now are much better quality than the teams that they were beating, 5 or 6 years ago when it came up and the Canadian junior team was able to go down there and steal away a couple wins back then. Back then what they did is they threw all the players from the same state. So whatever the host was, so Florida hosted a couple years in a row, then all the players were from Florida. So it was more like Team Canada versus Team Florida. This team was players from across the country.
Kent, we're switch topics a little bit, talking about Canadians playing in the U.S. You attended the Senior Bowl. Canadian Tyler Varga. Can you give us your thoughts on as to what you expect from Varga, or how he played, and what's his potential in the CFL or even perhaps in the NFL?
Well, it's looking more and more that Tyler's going to get an NFL look here. I pretty much guaranteed that somebody will draft him in the CFL to hold on to his rights. But he put on a great show down there at Senior Bowl. Straight from the weigh-in, the first morning, people were talking about that in the stands. And then from then on, he was the focus of many interviews after each practice, and he didn't look out of place at all.
So Central Scouting Bureau kind of has its list out right now that we're keeping track on, and the draft doesn't come up for a while. But is there a name maybe outside of the ordinary, outside of the box, that you yourself are keeping your eye on, and he might kind of make his way up scouting leading into the CFL draft?
Yeah, probably my key name is Campbell Allison. He's a big offensive lineman out of Eastern Michigan. And he hasn't been on any of the lists yet, but he's a guy that started at all the positions across the offensive line. He's done very well at Eastern Michigan, playing against some pretty big talent. They always play at least one out of the Michigan or Michigan States every year, and they're playing some pretty good squads all across the MAC.
Kent, you're the writer of the Canadian College Draft Guide. You yourself watch a lot of Canadian talent and a lot of football players go into the U.S. playing football. Where do you see the level of Canadian football players and talent at right now to compare to where it is? And, part two of the question is, what do you have to say to those people who say, well, you're just Canadian, you're still not as good as Americans? Like, where do you line up with both of those?
Well, to take on that second part first there, one of the big things that I use when talking with some of these American coaches is the state of California has about 34 million people, and the country of Canada has about 34 million people. And you'd be crazy not to recruit in California. And there's been a bias in Canada that a lot of the guys that they're looking at are all offensive, defensive linemen, the big farm-born guys that can push tractors around and that kind of thing. But there's a lot of skilled players in Canada that are simply getting overlooked. A few of them are a little raw around the edges, but you can't take away their athletic ability. Canadians have as much athletic ability as anybody else on the planet. So, we love them. And, more of what my push is when it comes to these guys is if the CIS gave bigger scholarships, I'd be a little more interested in keeping them all at home. But since they don't, you might as well take advantage of a great opportunity to get all your school paid for.
Absolutely.
Now, we recently saw in the Super Bowl some former CFLers kind of make a name for themselves. We're now seeing Canadians take the so-called skilled positions in the Canadian football. Running backs now are Canadians, and receivers are now Canadians. And, we're kind of seeing an increase in this game. We saw Canada win an international bowl. In your eyes, are we getting this much closer now to seeing our first Canadian QB? And do you see one out there in the near future from your prospecting?
The Canadian QB is still kind of that elusive thing still. There's a lot of good ones on the horizon coming up. Your number one issue with these guys coming into the CFL is just how much less experience they have compared to their American counterparts. For example, if you go back a couple years, like when Travis Lulay came into the CFL, he had already gone through 2 NFL training camps, prior to joining in with the Lions. So he had a little bit longer of a college career because the college season in the States is longer, for starters. So, he probably prepared and played in about 50% more games than his Canadian counterpart. And then on top of that, had gone through 2 NFL camps. When you take that much experience, it's really tough for a CIS guy to make that jump in. So, a guy like Michael O'Connor, that was recruited to Penn State last year, he's decided to transfer and move on, but he's probably the next hope, I guess, the next guy on the horizon.
Just want to throw in there that Tony stole my question. It just kind of happened in the previous interview, so that's kind of the pattern. Of what's going on. Yeah, the talk about Canadian quarterbacks has been rampant, I think, for quite some time because, it is that position. Tony did allude to that, running backs is a ratio buster. You find a good, solid Canadian running back, it's a ratio buster. What do Canadian quarterbacks have to do in order to be able to, for at least to maintain a backup spot? I mean, I can't think of the last Canadian quarterback that even maintained a top 3 spot and is able to stay on a contract for more than a year. What do Canadian quarterbacks have to do in order to develop at a better level? I
think the beauty of it right now is that the quarterback coaching that they're able to receive in Canada is improving. If you go back a couple of years, there was still only a couple of guys that were really focused in on strictly quarterback instruction. And over the last probably 5 years, we've seen 3 or 4 new groups come into town that are really pushing in and taking over that role of coaching quarterbacks especially. There's been a lot of guys that have worked with receivers, a lot of offensive line schools out there. And that's been great, and we've seen the improvement all across the board. But to get a couple more guys just focusing in on quarterback, I think that's the key starting point.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I have one more question I want to ask, and it does go back to the previous CIS season and maybe going forward. And it's been my soapbox for years that Quebec right now is a football factory for this country. And I'm not talking about fans. I'm talking about on-the-field product. And we've seen Laval dominate, which seems like forever. But Montreal took it convincingly. Have we seen a power shift in Quebec football from the Rouge d'Or to Montreal?
My quick answer would be no. It's going to take more than 1 year to kind of force the shift. I think what we're seeing there is a group of recruits that didn't want to go to Laval, and as a collective group, all decided to go to one place. And, Danny Machocha put together a really strong group. He had the ability to look these kids in the eye and say, I'm a previous CFL coach. I won a Grey Cup. Come work with me, and we'll all work towards this goal of a Vanier together. And I think the kids bought in on it and really pushed towards the same common goal. I hear it from a lot of Quebec kids. They want to beat Laval, and then half of them end up signing with Laval, and they move on that way. But I think there's kind of that urge. Well, even with the Patriots winning the Super Bowl, there's a lot more people on Monday morning dislike the Patriots than dislike them, Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. People don't like that team on top all the time. And And so I think there's been kind of that push. The flip side is Glenn Constantine is a fantastic recruiter. He's a great coach. And I think he's going to take this personal this year and come back with a vengeance next year.
Kent, I just have a really quick one here for you. Speaking about coaching, we are seeing a few CFL coaches drop down to coach the CIS. Look at Mike Gibson now taking that role. What, is that a good sign for the development of younger football players in our country, knowing that some of these guys with experience are going, hey, I see value in this? Or, what exactly do you make of moves like that, of pro football coaches going down to coach at the college level?
I think it's two good signs. I think number one is that they see a value in it, and they want to be relevant in Canadian football still. I think that was a big thing for Mike Gibson, was staying relevant in the Canadian game. Maybe looking towards another job back in the CFL in 2 or 3 years. And the second part of it is I think that means that our head coaching salaries are finally catching up to where they should be. The CIS notoriously is, while the scholarships are less, the salaries are less. Laval had 5 paid coaches and nobody else had more than 3. Just the fact that they give out a volunteer coach of the year award should tell you everything you need to know about that. And really, I think that maybe our salaries are finally catching up to a point where we're keeping the quality guys involved there. There's been a few Canadian coaches that they shake their heads and they can take a high school coaching job in the States and make more than they can in the CIS. And that's been a shame for years and years. So when you see Gibson going down and taking the Regina job, when you see Blake Mill moving from Calgary to UBC, I think that there's a little higher dollar value being placed on the head coaching spot.
All right, Kent Ridley from Ridley Scouting. The Twitter account says helping families with athletic recruiting options since 2003, and writer of the Canadian College Draft Guide. Follow him on Twitter at Ridley Scouting. Kent, thanks so much for the opportunity to interview you tonight, and I guess we'll look forward to touching base with you in the future again.
You bet, guys. Call anytime.
I just wanted to call back and hear more on what you think is going to happen to that Calgary program now with Mill moving on, but we'll save that for another day.
That'll be a show. And I also have questions about the Golden Bears program and what Chris Morris is doing with that, but we will save that for another show too. So, Ken, thanks so much, my man.
No problem, guys.
Fairly knowledgeable guy right there, Mr. Kent Ridley from Ridley Scouting. We did talk a bit about the International Bowl, the U18 one, where Canada won 25-9 over the U.S. The U19 Bowl's coming up this weekend. Canada did not win the one last year. But nonetheless, I think the underlying theme is here. Canadians can play football. You heard it right from.
And again, you said, they've won 2 years in a row, but if you follow the history of this tournament, and I have, over the past probably 8 years, Canada's won it at least 5 that I can remember off the top of my head before this. So this isn't a tournament where Canada sneaks in and, and upsets the United States. In the past, they've won this thing 32-2. There's been ones where they've shut them out. Like, Canada goes in to this term and dominates. So it's definitely a great omen for young Canadian football players. And, without trying to rant on our first show as the Rouge, I don't want to bring it down too much. I have to say, and it's why I asked Kent there that what happens to Canadian parents' brains when they see stuff like this and still encourage their kids to go into hockey. And we have U-under-18 hockey tournaments on national broadcasters and U-19 women's tournaments, under-20 tournaments. Here's a tournament where Canada clearly does well at, and you see nothing about it. I know I tweeted out through the old show account, and I didn't do it to offend anyone who enjoys hockey, but seriously, how much of this is going to be on the highlight show? And imagine this was a hockey game. It would be the first 10 minutes of a sports highlight package. And that's as far as I'm going to go on that rant, because I will do that later on once we get more comfortable as the Rouge, the new Rouge.
And imagine the guy was a Toronto Maple Leafs draft pick. That's like 7 hours worth of highlights if it was hockey. So anyway, we do digress. And I guess we can probably touch a little bit on, that big football game that happened last weekend, not the U18 International Bowl, but the Unite. But the other one, the Super Bowl, we can talk a bit about that. We're not really, an NFL podcast. We like to talk about Canadian football, but are there any comments you want to throw out there about the finish and how everyone's saying, it shouldn't have dropped back and thrown or whatnot? Like, what did you guys make out of the Super Bowl adults?
Well, first off, we talked about, how the CFL has been thought upon a land of NFL rejects, and then we have this guy who won CFL Rookie of the Year, actually, and then another guy who I believe was up for CFL Special Teams Player of the Year back in 2004, and both these guys, and I'm talking about Chris Matthews and John Ryan, who made pretty much a huge impact in the playoffs for Seattle. Obviously, Matthews in the big game, and pretty much was on his way. Had it not been for that idiotic call, probably would have found himself as a Super Bowl MVP. But I've got nothing else to say about that that final call.
Tony, any thoughts?
You know what? And I think here's where I think a lot of people think I'm going to get angry and turn into angry Tony and anti-NFL Tony. And it's quite the opposite. That was from what I saw, it was an exciting football game. I did make an effort to watch it, but once the kids were in bed, I sat down and I got to see the fourth quarter. And it was just an absolutely excellent game of football. I cannot disrespect, as a fan of the game, how exciting that game was. Was the play at the end stupid? I don't know. It's hard to say. I'm not going to use that as a gateway to get on my high horse, because that ending we actually saw in the Canadian Football League in 1988. It was BC and Winnipeg in Ottawa. Matt Dunnigan throws an interception on the goal line, and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers win the Grey Cup. And I think their last Grey Cup. And
second last Grey Cup.
It's a similar play, and we would credit that as maybe one of the greatest Grey Cups ever. So I enjoyed that. This year's Grey Cup ended on an illegal block on a return. The Vanier Cup ended on a blocked field goal, and the Super Bowl ended on a dumb passing play to end it up. I think it was kind of like almost a poetic ending to football in generally in North America. So I enjoyed Super Bowl XMV 55165, whatever the hell it is.
I'm actually surprised Tony didn't tweet out that was an epic finish, because Seattle got to that game on a freaking coin toss.
All right.
Yes.
We'll have to cue Tony up for that one eventually. A quick stat to throw out here, then we will move on. Doug Brown, speaking of Winnipeg Blue Bombers, tweeted something out this week. In 109 passes from the 1 yard line this year in the NFL, that was the first pick. Oh, and Marshawn Lynch, 1 for 5 from the 1 yard line this year too. Still think it was a bad call. Anyway, that's what Doug Brown tweeted out. So I thought that was interesting, but Tony was right. What a game, and it definitely was an exciting finish. Okay, no more NFL talk. We got to get to some CFL. We enjoy talking about Canadian football. A lot's been going on in the last 7 days since our last podcast. Adults, what's happening in the CFL this week?
Oh, there's a lot of moving and shaking. A couple of free agent signings. Tyler Holmes re-signs with Toronto. Weston Dresser, in typical Rider fashion, he re-signed with the Saskatchewan Roughriders the day after our last show. Odell Wills re-signed with the Edmonton Eskimos. Gerald Brown with the Owls. Ben Heaton, released from the Riders, he signed with the Indianapolis Colts to join Jarrell Freeman, Enoch Mwamba, and a couple other CFL players. Hugh O'Neill and Woody Tran re-signed with the Riders. Brendan Retley also re-signed with the Alouettes. The Stamps didn't extend it, or they extended a couple players, Brett Bennett and Jock Sanders. Taylor Reed, as of today, extended with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. punter from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Mike Renaud, officially announced his retirement, and as of a couple hours ago, speedy Brandon Banks has re-upped for 3 years with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And that is all you need to know with the CFL. And you know what? Just the anticipation, the Riders are going to do something tomorrow morning. We don't know what.
They're going to sign or trade somebody.
They're going to do something.
The irony that Brandon Banks and Taylor Reid, two of the focal points from the Grey Cup on the Hamilton side, Taylor Reid more so because of the guys sent on the block, both signed on the same day. The irony. So yes, Saskatchewan Roughriders, your move. Is it Dan DePalma you're going to trade or sign? Who's it going to be? I guess that totally shoots down our theory.
Chris Getzlaff at $1.7 million.
I don't even know what to say to that.
For 1 year.
For those of you that are new to the show, there are quite a few, and we want to welcome you, Rouge Radio listeners, who have joined on, and definitely excited to have you on. One thing that has happened over the past year, we will have a show, and the next day, the Riders will sign somebody big. Like the Western Dressler sweepstakes, we just finished recording this great show. An hour later, not even an hour later, Dressler signs at like 10:30 p.m. Really? You couldn't have waited till the next morning at least? Anyway, so that's where some of that humor comes from.
Last week was the Foley deal, right?
The week before, yeah. Last week was Dressler.
Before.
The week before was Foley. So they're on track. Do you guys want to make a prediction who the Riders might sign? Tony already made his. Getzlaff for 1.7. I think that's still a little, not as much as I would hope.
We know Dave's will be Nick Lewis.
Right, I did say that. I did say Nick Lewis, but yeah, now that Ben Heenan's gone, I would guess that Getzlaff, there's room for the salary. Dulce, any predictions for who the Riders will sign tomorrow morning?
They'll trade Darian Durant. No, I'm kidding. No. Tino Sinceri, most likely.
Tino Sinceri to a 7-year deal. The sunny side up. Well, free agency, the big day next week already. Can't believe that.
It's kind of hard to say big day. The Calgary Stampeders are kind of ruining it.
There aren't many names left.
No, I don't think we're going to get our dream free agency that we got last year.
No, that was pretty.
Not that I want to rain on our parade here, but I think it could be a pretty quiet day, unless someone tries to trade up for Ottawa's pick. But we won't see that till the draft. I'm
going down the list here. Dalton, Deja Dunn, Glenn January. Those might be two names that jump off the page for me. I'm having Dan DePalma. There we go. Big touchdown for the Riders last year. He might be the big one tomorrow. But I'm really a lot of loss for words who the big, like Tony's right, Calgary players that are still left. Micah Johnson maybe, you know.
I think if you're looking at offensive linemen as your big key players, you got Sir Vincent Rogers out of Toronto, Brett Jones. I mean, granted, he's probably going to have some NFL aspirations, but Stanley Bryant, he's going to make some pretty good coin this free agency. I mean, for an import offensive lineman, I could see where he's probably going to get $150K.
So almost Chris Getzlaff money, pretty close. We've had a pretty busy week leading up to this big day today, the launch of the new Rouge. We haven't lost our swagger, we've only dropped it. We're still moving forward with some swagger. More than happy to carry on the tradition of the Rouge Radio name. So
really, we've become Ottawa Red Blacks receivers. We didn't get rid of it, we just dropped it.
I guess so.
We didn't throw it away. We just dropped it. Hashtag poor Henry Burris.
Hashtag you dropped it.
Yeah.
Hashtag you blew it. Tony, what's going on social media? Any big stuff? Obviously, the big news is our big launch today.
It is. I wanted to stay for that because it is a fun day. It's a big day. And, Kent Ridley throwing us out props for launching a new format. And it's nice to see him. Of course, the ever-beloved former fake Mark Cohan, his tweet, I've taken down a commissioner and a podcast in less than a month. Mwahaha. We'll see what he's got in the future for us. That's pretty good. And we get some love from Nate Kuhorn. He's telling everyone to check out the new show. And I do want to answer a tweet from @footballguy41. Looks like his name is Taylor. A little concerned he's going to have to subscribe to a new podcast. But nope, as long as you followed the old Swagger and Stagger show, you automatically are now following the new Rouge.
New website, YouTube, Facebook page. We are taking over the Facebook page of Rouge Radio, and a few more tweaks to come in the coming weeks. Definitely continue to listen. Daltz, any final thoughts?
Oh, just 6 days away for free agency, and there's not a big name left, but there's a lot of depth players, and I can imagine Winnipeg's going to go balls to the wall to make sure that they're going to be there come November in Winnipeg.
#balls to the wall. Tony.
Calgary Stampeders making a hard case not to pick them to win a Grey Cup again. Everything is about team chemistry, free agency around the corner, not going to lose a lot of pieces, re-signing everyone they need. And when you've got a guy like John Huffnagel running the show and a team of coaches behind him like he has there, whatever he's bringing in training camp is probably going to easily make up for what he lost. So Calgary Stampeders sending a big message to the Canadian Football League this week with 2 more big signings, saying if you want this Grey Cup, you're going to have to beat us again.
We are the new Rouge, and now the single point. When Daltz and I started this project 5 years ago, never really dreamed that we'd have the kind of following we do now. We've had guests like Chris Cuthbert, Milt Stiegel, and the like on our show. Many pivotal shows where we predicted outcomes and had some epic bloopers. But if you take anything away from this show tonight, let it be we are so grateful to you, the listener. Thanks for pushing us to be better, and we're excited about the new opportunity with Rouge Radio. There are quite a few other CFL podcasts out there. We're all friends, but we promise you one thing. Our goal is to be simply the best. On behalf of Jason and Kent, Daltz and Tony, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.